Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Tuesday, June 21st. Over the next few days, we will have an increase in thunderstorm activity across the Great Basin. Could have a few isolated strikes in far southeast Utah today, but for the most part, Wednesday is the first push of moisture and thunderstorms into the Arizona Strip in Utah. These thunderstorms by Thursday will spread across much of Nevada and Utah and possibly up into southern Idaho. These storms will be a mix of wet and dry, so we will have some increases to fire potential, but also have some increases in moisture in some areas. Over the last 24 hours, we only saw some thunderstorms over eastern Idaho, Wyoming, and far northern and northeast Utah, with some showers associated with the lightning in Idaho and Wyoming. Great Basin fire activity is shown here with just smaller fires reported across Idaho, northern Utah, and northern Nevada with minimal growth. We did have some growth on our large fires, and our two large fires in the northern part of the Ely District, Kinsley, and then the Left Fork fire down in southwest Utah. Over the last 7 to 14 days, precipitation has occurred over the eastern and northern half of the Great Basin. Some areas have been above normal with precipitation in the far north, but also some areas of northeast Utah as well with that latest push of moisture. Still very dry areas remain in the southern half of Nevada, much of the Arizona Strip, and into the southern half of Utah. Our current ERCs over parts of southern and southeast Utah, ERCs have come down with the recent push of moisture over the last several days. However, we have had some drying out recently as well. So ERCs have dropped below that 90th percentile, but will be ticking back upwards here over the next couple of days before the moisture returns. Areas over southern and eastern Nevada did not quite see as much moisture. ERCs came down just a little bit, but still remain very high and near record highs for the time of year. So still very dry in southern and eastern Nevada into parts of western Utah. The satellite loop from this morning shows a weak trough of low pressure over central California. That will help push moisture up from the south, from Mexico into Arizona, and eventually up into Utah. You can see the deeper moisture is still further east over parts of New Mexico and Colorado. Later today, again, that moisture starts to push north across Arizona, could push into far southeast Utah, but for the most part, drier and warmer conditions region-wide today with no high risk. Relative humidity drops back into the single digits and low teens over much of the area, a little bit higher further north into Idaho. Again, most of that moisture stays into Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado, but we could see a few strikes in far southeast Utah. It's by Wednesday where that moisture really pushes north. We do have one small area of high risk down south in the Dixie. Again, we will see a little bit more lightning activity across other areas of central and southern Utah into the Arizona Strip, but those areas that are still on the dry side, maybe parts of far southern Utah into the Arizona Strip could be at risk as well for those mix of wet and dry thunderstorms that could increase fire potential. You can see from the relative humidity, we are going to see that increase in relative humidity already over southeast Utah as that moisture pushes north. But again, it's these thunderstorms on the western fringe that could be a problem on Wednesday. So again, that's where the high risk is. Could see Sierra pushing up towards Lake Tahoe on Wednesday, but for the most part, those will stay into California and outside of our geographic area. But we could have a few strikes here on our far west side. As we move into Thursday, that's where the better push of moisture is over much of Nevada and Utah, again, possibly up into southern Idaho. We do have some high risk still on the Dixie and then also into parts of Spring Mountains in southern Nevada and the southern portion of the Ely District. We'll be watching northern portions of the Ely District. ERCs have come down a little bit in that area, but again, not significantly. So as we dry out over the next few days, we could see a risk a little bit further north as well. Looking at the weather pattern on Thursday, you can see the relative humidity really increases over the eastern half of Utah, but still remains relatively low over Nevada and Utah in the western side. However, still a significant increase from what we'll see in relative humidities today. So you can see the thunderstorms on the right. Again, much of Nevada and Utah at risk for those thunderstorms, and you can see more the spotty pattern in the precipitation over parts of northern Ely District, Elko, possibly even western and northwest Utah as well. So we'll be watching those areas for potential high risk. Also some isolated storms up into Idaho and Wyoming. You can see the 3-day forecast amounts of precipitation here. Obviously, better chances of precipitation with these storms as we move over eastern and southeast Utah. Not quite as much thunderstorm or precipitation rather further west over parts of Nevada and southern Utah. So again, that's where we'll be watching for our potential increase in fire potential. As we move into Friday, thunderstorm activity will be pushed further east over the eastern half of the Great Basin with drier conditions over western areas. No high risk as many of these areas in Utah will have been experiencing moisture for a couple of days by that point. On Saturday, we will see drier conditions, but again, another push from the south that could increase some thunderstorm activity over parts of central Nevada, parts of western Nevada, and even into southern Utah. As we move into Sunday, that moisture gets pushed further east, and by Monday still remains over the eastern portions of the Great Basin. You can see in the far southern portion of this image Tropical Storm Celia, which will be tracking west off the eastern Pacific coast in Mexico. 7-day total amounts of precipitation are shown here. You can see that lightning activity over much of the Great Basin, bringing at least some light shower activity with better potential of wetting rains or at least spotty wetting rains over southeast Utah and maybe even into parts of the central Utah mountains as we go through the weekend into early next week. But again, precipitation very spotty over western areas. The 8 to 14-day outlook taking us from June 28th through July 4th shows again cooler, wetter conditions in the Four Corners area, again associated with continuous pulses of monsoon moisture, and then warmer and drier on our western fringes up into Idaho and far western sides of Nevada. That concludes our webcast for today. Check back tomorrow for the latest updates.